Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and good morning for all the viewers who are watching us from across the ocean, from other continents. Welcome to you all to this event, Exploring, Understanding and Celebrating Jewish Intangible Heritage and its Contemporary Relevance. My name is Alina Marintian, and I will be the moderator of this event on behalf of the European Association of the Preservation of and Promotion of Jewish Culture and Heritage, also called and known as AEPJ. I would like to warmly thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar introduces the new Intangible Jewish Heritage website. It's a digital platform. It is created to document and safeguard and share living Jewish traditions across Europe. We created this place, which we're hoping to explore how stories and rituals and languages and memories, how they are all transmitted from generation to generation, and why this living heritage is essential to Jewish identity and to European cultural diversity. I would also like to specifically say that this event is part of the Thrive project, and it aligns with UNESCO approach of safeguarding intangible cultural heritage. It is led by the World Jewish Congress and the European Union of Jewish Students and AEPJ. Thrive project brings together key Jewish institutions to empower Jewish communities through resources, through visibility, heritage, and cultural management and engagement. I'm very pleased to introduce our distinguished guests today, and I will briefly introduce them, and then I will let them speak one by one. First, we're joined by our colleague Victor Sorensen, who is a director of AEPJ. And in a moment, he will briefly share the institutional perspective behind the project and its vision. Our colleague Paul Sanchez, who takes care of the communication part of the project, is also joining us today. Mila Stojanovic, we're welcoming her. She's from the World Jewish Congress, and she brings a strong community-based and international perspective to the topic of Jewish living heritage. Delighted to have Jonas Markowitz with us. He's the executive director of the European Union of Jewish Students. Finally, it is our honor to welcome Professor Carsten Wilke from Central European University. He's a specialist in Jewish studies and cultural heritage, and he will be the one offering us the keynote reflection on the importance of Jewish intangible heritage today. And last but not least, let us all thank our colleagues, the digital intervention team, led by Ivo Mladenov and Livecast. Thank you all for being with us. Let's proceed with the brief opening remarks. Then I'm going to present shortly the website, the platform, and then we'll pass on to Professor Carsten Wilke for his keynote. But for now, let's hear a word from Mila Stojanovic.
Thank you, Alina. So at World Jewish Congress, our role is not only to represent Jewish communities, but globally, but to help ensure that Jewish life remains strong, resilient, and meaningful in rapidly changing contexts. This requires more than advocacy or protection alone. It requires investment in people, in knowledge, and in the cultural foundations that hold communities together. Thrive Project is about long-term capacity building, supporting communities to better understand their realities, to share expertise across borders, and to strengthen the frameworks that sustain Jewish life, socially, culturally, and institutionally. Intangible heritage plays a critical role in this work that would not be possible without strong partnerships. I would like to particularly acknowledge the European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Culture and Heritage, which leads the Intangible Heritage Package within Thrive Project. AEPJ brings deep expertise and long-standing experience in working with communities, institutions, and professionals to safeguard and prompt Jewish culture and heritage in a way that is both rigorous and community-centered. I would also like to highlight the essential role of the European Union of Jewish Students, who ensure that younger generations are not only included, but actively involved. Today's webinar and the platform we are presenting should be understood in the context of a wider ecosystem that we are building together. Safeguarding intangible heritage depends on participation, on individuals, families, educators, and communities recognizing their role in maintaining and transmitting cultural knowledge. When more people are empowered to engage, contribute, and share, heritage becomes more resilient and more relevant. By engaging with the platform, contributing stories and practices, each one of us becomes part of the process that keeps tradition alive and meaningful. Through shared responsibility and collaboration, our heritage continues to grow. So thank you very much for joining us and for contributing to this collective effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mila, for your kind words and for your wisdom. And Jonas, now it's your turn to share a couple of words with us.
Thank you, Alina. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here today representing the European Union of Jewish Students, and at EUJS, we represent Jewish adults and Jewish students across Europe. But our role also goes beyond representation, where we really work to make sure a Jewish life for younger generation remains strong, informed, and connected, even as the world around us keeps changing quite quickly. For us, safeguarding Jewish life isn't just about responding to challenges or reacting when something goes wrong. It's also about investing in people, in knowledge, and in the spaces where identity, culture, and belonging take shape. And this is particularly true as universities, as youth movements, and as student communities are often exactly where questions of heritage, questions of continuity, and questions of transmission play out every single day. It's also where traditions are being questioned, adapted, and passed on, often for the first time without family structures close by. And this is why the Thrive project speaks directly to our reality. Strong communities, we believe, do not happen by accident, but rather they are built through learning from one another and sharing experience. I really want to acknowledge our two partners for the project. First, the World Jewish Congress for its commitment for this work and for being a driving force behind it, helping to ensure that Jewish life across Europe and beyond remains strong, resilient, and meaningful. And our second partner, the European Association for the Preservation and Promotion of Jewish Culture and Heritage, for leading the intangible heritage component of the Thrive project. Without them, their expertise and dedication have been essential to making this project possible. And to all the participants and to Professor Wilke as well, thank you for joining us today and for contributing to this collective effort.
Thank you so much, Jonas. Thank you. And Victor?
Yeah, thank you, Alina. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for being with us today. I just wanted to share that for the AEPJ, the Thrive project represents a significant milestone in the way we approach Jewish heritage in Europe. For many years, much of our work has focused on places, sites, and material traces of history. Yet we have always known that heritage does not live only in stone and archives, but in gestures, stories, sounds, recipes, rituals, in what communities carry and transmit through everyday life. Thrive allows us to bring the living dimension to the center of our work. It recognizes intangible Jewish heritage as dynamic, contemporary, and profoundly communal, and offers a collaborative digital space where these traditions can be documented, shared, and revitalized by the communities themselves. So at an institutional level, this project is key for AEPJ because it bridges cultural participation, education, and digital innovation, fully aligned with a European vision of heritage as a driver of dialogue, resilience, and social cohesion. We are also very fortunate to develop this journey together with our outstanding partners, World Jewish Congress and the European Union of Jewish Students, whose commitment to Jewish life and community empowerment gives this project real depth and impact. And also, I would like to take advantage and say that we are especially grateful to Professor Carsten Wilke for joining us today and helping us reflect on the meaning, the weight, and the vitality of intangible heritage in contemporary Jewish life. We understand this project not simply as a platform, but a space where memory meets the present and where heritage continues to grow. So thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you, Victor. And just to follow up on Victor's enthusiasm, I myself am very happy and enthusiastic about this beautiful project, as we often call it. Now, to continue this, let me just briefly prepare my screen for sharing. Just a second to. Okay, just a second. A short presentation on how this platform looks like. Just somebody tell me if everything is okay, if you see my screen. Yes?
Yes.
Okay, so this platform is a collaborative project. You're very welcome to join and browse it. This website will carry you through how it works. What you have to do first is submit your tradition. Think of something that you keep inside your heart, inside your mind, and something that you shared with your family. Once you submit this, our team will review. And once this review is done, your submission will be out on this platform. Now, once we have 100 submissions, you'll be able to explore all these submissions, and soon you'll start to vote. At the end of this voting, there will be an online exhibition with prizes, and it will be like some kind of a contest. Now, if you're uncertain what types of submissions are you allowed to upload, please browse and explore all this platform. It is sorted out by categories. You're supposed to tell the story very briefly. This is a very friendly and welcoming platform. You start with the basics, just a short overview with a title, 1 or 2 sentences about your tradition or custom, and then you can choose to detail it a little bit, or you'll see there's a function where you can upload a video, or if you don't want to type, or video or an audio. Explain why is it important, if it's disappearing or not, or if it has a protective status, what's the context, the language context, and the country you submit from. I have to specify at this point that it is a European project, but all submissions are welcomed, even if you submit from other parts of the world and other countries. If it refers to European Jewish heritage, we will take it into consideration. Just name, say if it's an individual or it's a public, it's an organizational, institutional submission. And because we want to take this project further, it is very important for us to have the sources, be that bibliography or just name, this is my grandmother's story, and so on. But it's important to have it, to have some kind of document. This is what you'll get once the submission is successful. You can explore it, and then we have already accepted some submissions. These are very interesting. You can start browsing right now as we speak, or as soon as we finish. If you are questioning what is intangible heritage, we do have a Q&A, and also we have experts who are ready to inspire you, but feel free to text us and to email us if there are any questions regarding your submissions. So please do get in touch with us and submit your traditions, your stories, your personal stories, and the lives of your family and of this European heritage. I'm going to stop now, and it will be my pleasure from now on to introduce again Professor Wilke. And just a couple of words. Professor Wilke is a professor of history and Jewish studies, at Central University. And he initiated a course in Jewish cultural heritage, right, Professor?
Right, yes.
He also serves as the director of the Center of Religious Studies at the same university. He holds a PhD in Jewish studies from the University of Cologne, and he teaches courses in Jewish history, cultural heritage, and historiography. His research spans Jewish history from Middle Ages to modernity, with particular interest in Sephardic Jews in Europe, early modernity Jewish mysticism, and the cultural and religious history of European Jewry. The Jewish Cultural Heritage Studies at the CEU began in 2015, and I repeat, it was initiated by Professor Wilke. Professor Wilke, welcome. I'm gonna let you tell us what you know about intangible Jewish heritage, but not before reminding you that in our previous conversations about the importance of intangible Jewish heritage, there was one idea that you shared with me and that stayed with me since then. You spoke about the burden of intangible Jewish heritage. And I invite you to start from here. Could you explain what you meant by that, and what is intangible heritage that carries not only value and meaning, as we all know, but also a certain way, a burden that goes beyond being simply a cultural legacy to be celebrated? Professor.
All right, thank you. Can I share my presentation?
Please.
Do you see it?
Not yet. It should come. Yes, now it's working.
No, it's not this one.
Okay.
Is this visible?
Yes.
Good. So, dear viewers, dear listeners, I would like to give hearty thanks to the World Congress and to the AEPJ and to all its collaborators for their kind invitation to speak at this event. We are launching the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal, which self-describes as a new initiative by AEPJ to collect, preserve, and share the living traditions of Jewish communities across Europe. In accordance with a fivefold division of the UNESCO intangible heritage, language, performance, social ritual, worldviews, and craftsmanship, this archive of the overlooked immaterial legacy of European Jewry starts with 6 well-chosen examples: setting the tombstones with their peculiar language of memory, emitting protective spits and spells, feeding birds on Tu B'Shvat, masquerading for Purim, making family vows on Hanukkah, and a corpus of Hasidic songs from the Carpathian Mountains, collected about a century ago and still moving us. The new initiative blends into the important efforts undertaken since almost 40 years to preserve and communicate Europe's surviving and reviving Jewish heritage. Intangible Jewish heritage fits seamlessly into a landscape of Jewish quarters, Jewish museums, Jewish heritage routes. Many Jewish festivals and European days of Jewish culture have taught us to include the genres of cultural creativity into the more common frameworks of the monument and the museum, as if the scene and the props were there, and finally they will receive the drama that we play on them. In a decade of teaching Jewish cultural heritage at Central European University in Budapest and in Vienna, I have progressively reserved more and more attention for immaterial heritage, musical and theatrical performance in particular. Yet this portal is singular. By the emphasis on present practices and living traditions transmitted in Jewish communities and families all over Europe, the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal breaks out from the conventions of memory keeping by which Jewish culture is historicized, objectivized, aestheticized, musealized, in a word, heritagized. The emphasis is no more exclusively on the diffusion of Jewish cultural goods within a public or mixed audience, but rather on their private circulation, or to say it with a traditional Hebrew term, on their peculiar chain of transmission, their shasheret HaKabbalah. This afternoon is thus a result of some 40 years of heritage preservation, yet it is also a breach with some of its common patterns. If this reflection sounds a bit abstract to you, let me illustrate it with a personal recollection. In 2008, Rabbi Albert Gabay, whom some of you might know, invited me to pass Rosh Hashanah with his Sephardic congregation, Mikveh Israel, in downtown Philadelphia. I joined the prayer and gave a short talk after service. On our plates, we had adafina, the stew that Sephardim prepare for Sabbath since time immemorial. While I had never tasted that dish before, I had read much about it in medieval poetry and in Inquisition files from the 15th century, when Spanish Judeo converts were persecuted for having prepared. I was thrilled, since I had never expected that I would meet people who continued cooking this legendary dish. I had been studying Sephardic history for decades. I had tried to imagine adafina in the bowl that stands on the table of the Sarajevo Haggadah, which depicts a family meal in Barcelona around 1350. But at that moment, this story suddenly acquired an aroma and a taste. And when the ladies of Mikveh Israel congregation saw how devotedly I ate their food, they packed a whole load for me to enjoy it on the second holiday as well. Of course, I'm not the only one to succumb to the charm of adafina. Cookbooks, printed and online, share recipes from the cherished heirlooms of mothers and grandmothers. The American novelist Yael Azaguri has written in 2022 an article with the title "Adafina Brings Alive Childhood Memories from Tangier," where she mapped the emotions triggered by the ancestral food. The adafina that she ate on Sabbath with her parents helped her, she writes, to decode the textures of their relationship, to grasp their secrets and worries, and thus to interpret in other settings the emotional temperature of a room, to read undercurrents of joy, sadness, concealment, or discontent. She admits that this heavy stew was not really to her taste, an antiquated food, somber and stodgy. She came to dislike it, yet, she writes, with time we embellish the object we regret, and at some point she started cooking it again. And then she writes, adafina is not only a meal, it is a credo, a system of beliefs. It is the emblem of a microcosm, of a place, of the people who cooked it, of my mother and my father, of our friends, of the person I was back then, of a reassuring weekly return, of regulated time, of the cocoon we lose when we become adults and take on responsibilities, of my Mediterranean world. Adafina, the one I now make for my children, is redolent of a vanished universe, that of my own childhood, which will never return. Adafina encapsulates lost times, from tri-religious Spain to the Jewish migration from Morocco. In the latest number of the very scholarly French journal 16e siècle, Hélène Jawara-Pinière reflects on the saga of adafina, in which the Inquisition participated, but also generations and generations of Sephardic Jews who continued cooking it in family. L'adafina, de l'oppression à la permanence, reflet d'un patrimoine culinaire juif, séfarade, vivant. And here the central term appears on the page, vivant, life. For Jawara, one might presume a living heritage, patrimoine vivant, is simply a tradition that has survived until our day, and that, she writes, incarnates the persistence of a profound cultural identity. Yet this life, which is so regularly associated with intangible heritage, seems to have a deeper symbolism. Our website announced a living archive of Jewish heritage, or a living tapestry that will keep our shared memory alive for future generations. A Viennese organization whose work parallels ours to some extent, I'm talking of Centropa, uses a similar motto, preserving Jewish memory, bringing history to life. The insistent association between intangible heritage and life endows its expressions with its testimony, its traditions, with an almost salvific power. We expect a lot from intangible heritage. And with all the enthusiasm that overtook me during my Rosh Hashanah in Philadelphia, when I for the first time tasted Adafina, I cannot avoid asking the skeptical question, because I am a scholar after all. Why could a stew contain more life than a book? Be to a larger extent the intersection of human relations. The ever-present binary of life and death in our language creates an all too sharp distinction between sources that should be imagined in harmony, the present and the past, the practice and the object that is its result, the immediate experience and the reflection that it entails, the world of Jewish tradition and that of general human culture. I would like to look at these four binaries that I've established here, one by one. We value immediate experience over historical consciousness. UNESCO defines intangible heritage as the traditions or living expressions inherited from our ancestors and passed on to our descendants. This definition in UNESCO leads to a means of objectifying heritage through knowledge. It considers, I quote, not the cultural manifestation itself, but rather the wealth of knowledge and skills that is transmitted. But can one extract the recipe of the Adafina from the sensorial reality and from the intense social framework of collective Sabbath keeping in the family or in the community? As Yael Azaguri described it, cooking the Adafina brings together a place, a biographical and a historical time that can be in the past, a human constellation, a geographical space that can be very far away, a worldview that wants to be deciphered and that we do not know yet while practicing the ritual. It is this historical memory that revives the dish and the Sabbath ritual that would otherwise have been, as Azaguri writes, heavy and indigestible. Does it depend really on the medium whether memory is productive or sterile? It is probably no less intangible heritage, is perhaps not less living than the great synagogue of Budapest with its prayer service alternating with klezmer concerts and huge international crowds swirling around speaking dozens of languages. It is perhaps not less alive than this auratic space of the Sarajevo Agada at the Bosnian National Museum, to which you enter with awe for a few minutes, or the Barcelona synagogue, where the painter of the Agada probably said his prayer before eating his Adafina in the 14th century. Professor Danielle Yancu-Agou in France showed me the medieval mikvah in Montpellier, which she had helped discover and excavate. And she told me about the moment in which she heard from the caretaker the news that the water had flown back into this medieval basin, as if the place had a memory and, yes, a life. And the water is still there. Yet the Kal, the Jewish quarter of Barcelona, the Sarajevo Agada, and the medieval mikveh, the Adafina, are all part of a common cultural continuum. The UNESCO Convention of 2003 on the safeguarding of the intangible cultural heritage speaks of a deep-seated interdependence between the intangible cultural heritage and the tangible cultural and natural heritage. Objects and practices are interlocked in peculiar ways. Material objects are memory aids that symbolize an entire experience of social relations that lies beyond them, that we cannot immediately communicate to those who follow different rhythms. This leads us to the impossibility of sharing the intimacy of social relations, of sharing that which indeed makes out intangible heritage without resorting to some kind of discursive or material artifact. Intangible heritage should not be forced to work under intolerable demands and impossible expectations. Intangible heritage, just as buildings and texts, needs a pedagogical effort to become legible for a larger audience. But how much can we communicate? How much should we share of it? The Hungarian musicologist Judith Frigyesi wrote a book, Writing on Water, about the ethnomusicological research that she carried out as a young student in the 1970s among the Orthodox Jewish prayer assemblies in communist-era Budapest. In her research on the sacred melodies, she adventured into the domestic prayer spaces to bathe, as she wrote, in the radiance of the sound of their prayer. The musicologist, stemming from a secular Jewish background, felt like a stranger, repeatedly losing her way in the labyrinth of the prayers. Beyond the musical traditions that she was studying, she sensed a wholeness of religious experience that is expressed by these voices, that was much more than the sum of the tunes. And I quote from her field diary: "As I descended deeper in the world of traditional Jewish communities, I began to understand that it was not the notes that compelled me, but the whole, their lives, a life that was music. They evoked in me the mystery of existence. In their well of ever-deepening memory, a radiant and incomprehensible essence shone around it formed layers of silence and mist, hesitancy, ambiguity, and stumbling. In these sounds I believed I had found everything I had missed in classical music." While she was standing there watching the assembly from behind the curtain in the improvised women's section of the prayer room, she felt like an intruder. She realized that due to her presence, the men were controlling their tone and pitch in an awkward way. I had destroyed the serenity of that prayer, she recognized. Even when she found a community where she was admitted, it was out of the question to bring in a tape recorder and record the synagogue service. Frigyesi had to make an appointment with a cantor after services to record his voice. She writes, "It is forbidden to record on Shabbos. We have been carrying on with our sessions in secret." He would make the effort to sing just as he would in the prayer house and pray, as if I were not there. This is, you cannot pack the prayer sounds and transport them. This is one of the most fascinating characteristics of most Jewish rituals. They elude the technical reproduction. Whatever happens in a synagogue and in a family home on Sabbaths and holidays, that is, all the most relevant religious activity escapes recorders and cell phone cameras. There is no recording besides human memory. The dish that is cooked for Sabbath, Hamin in the Talmud and its many derivatives, Adafina, Chulent, and so on, is ritually prepared and consumed at home, they are not recooked anywhere. You will not find Adafina in a restaurant, neither in Spain nor in Israel or elsewhere. Moreover, there is no major demand for such a public distribution. A generation raised on burgers and sushis will not fall spontaneously for overcooked stew. You need the touristic reenactment of pre-war salons, or transport yourself in your imagination to a shtetl in winter in order to relish Julent. Adafina only exists and lives in a family or community setting where it revives personal or historical memories. Just like Frigyesi, who could not record the synagogue service, but needed to create a parallel environment for her recordings and interviews with the cantors, the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal realizes that an intermediate step is needed between the practice and its audience. Most importantly, a narrator needs to intervene and create the testimony as a personal, literary, and audiovisual artifact. Digitized Jewish heritage thus benefits from all the experience made during the era of the witness, to use Anvi Vjorka's term, its conversation and documentation techniques that have collected memories of survival first, of ordinary post-war lives later. However, the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal transcends the level of testimony collecting insofar as it undertakes a more focused documentation effort of experiences and expertises in well-defined fields. These fields can extend to social environments that do not admit crowds and technical replication. The portal's call, "Tell Your Story," includes documenting social practices on love and secular situations of intimacy in couple, family, community, or Jewish dating apps that are inaccessible to the gaze of tourists, web tourists, and recorders. No less than the Sabbath gatherings, they call for non-mimetic procedures of representation and communication. The development of insightful translation methods is crucial for both the religious and the secular aspects of Judaism. Like prayer melodies, many educational traditions, its arts and crafts, its procedures of mindfulness may possibly ask for a new type of heritage broker who will find its field of activity precisely in the type of portal that we are launching today. The step from transmitting tradition to celebrating heritage is not easy, since it is indeed a shift to a secular form of expression. And this shift also operates in intercultural dialogue. If we return to the UNESCO Convention, it mentions the invaluable role of the intangible cultural heritage as a factor in bringing human beings closer together and ensuring an exchange and understanding among them. World heritage is about sharing cultural traditions of symbolic value among a large and mixed audience comprising both initiated participants and total outsiders living on other continents. As in non-metaphorical cases of inheritance, there are communities of heirs with varying degrees of entitlement to heritage, sometimes with uncertainties and contested claims, but with a basic notion of a heritage community. Jews participate in maintaining continuity, non-Jews are observers and reenact heritage for personal purposes that have intrigued heritage researchers. Sharing Jewish traditions with non-Jewish friends and the social environment at large is an old custom going back to Talmudic antiquity. We carry it back to the customs of the meal on Passover Eve, the meal that Ashkenazim call the Seder and Sephardim the Agadah. on the famous engraving of Bernard Picard, there sits a non-Jewish man at the table on the left, who does not have a ritual in front of him and probably does not understand the Aramaic text, but he is given a matzah by the mistress of the house, and thereby he becomes a participant in the ritual, just like the servants who participate, who are feasting as well. The custom to invite non-Jews in this festival may have started as a practical safety measure to have a witness against possible slander against this nighttime gathering. Yet it became a powerful means to spread knowledge about Jewish faith, about the liberating act of the Exodus and other Jewish history, and about the rich diversity of Jewish traditions. I share the confidence of these ancient authorities that familiarity with Jewish traditions may lead those non-Jewish visitors ultimately to oppose hate movements actively, and that even in crucial situation of threat, they would not flee into silence and appeasement. There are other benefits of spreading knowledge about Jewish traditions, practices, and personal experiences. They diminish the preponderance of the theological, political interpretations that burden the image of Judaism in general perception. And it is also a strategy to deal competently with the complex of guilt and the quest for redemption that emerges from them. The present site, since it is published on the internet, will hopefully be open to the appreciation, if not the appropriation, by non-Jews, with all the questions of legitimacy that such appropriations have raised since the epoch-making book by Ruth Gruber, Virtually Jewish. Gruber is amazed at the sight of the Jewish cultural festival that non-Jewish organizers started to animate in the Jewish quarter of Krakow since the fall of communist rule. She writes, 3,000 people, most of them young non-Jews, clap and glance past midnight each summer at the gala open-air concert of klezmer and other Jewish music in the main square of Kazimierz. That concludes the Jewish cultural festival. Jewish memory becomes the pretext, or even more than a pretext, for some kind of liberating orgy. And as Magdalena Waligorska writes on this non-Jewish fascination with Jewish intangible heritage in her book Klezmer's Afterlife, if we can understand ourselves fully only by examining our relation with Jews, perhaps our involvement with the other is, in the first place, a quest for the self. Among Jews as well as non-Jews, the quest for intangible Jewish heritage is not always a search for knowledge, but for a safe space from what I would call the religious and political over-determination of Jewish persons and things. Music, food, Yiddish jokes, and joyful social rituals suspend the burden of darker remembrance. In the case of the noisy partying with Jewish pretexts, the seemingly stereotypic ingredients of intangible heritage were successfully integrated into heritage spaces, such as Kazimierz, and even commodified and stabilized by the rituals of consumer society. In search of a more comprehensive representation of Jewish culture, various genres of festivals, events, and finally web presences created interactive frameworks in which everyone is not just an observer, but an active participant. I invite you to Paris. It is Sunday. I walk on Rue des Rosiers, the historical Jewish neighborhood in Paris and the main destination of a huge tourism interested in things Jewish. The tourists do not queue at any museum as in Berlin or Warsaw, nor at a cemetery as in Prague. They stand in line in front of a fast food outlet called the Falafel Ace, L'As du Falafel. In the street, you can meet Yomi Peretz, the owner, whose parents, Ashkenazim from Jaffa, opened a deli there in 1979, and their falafels subsequently became the most acclaimed in this demanding city of gourmets. Yomi Peretz was the hero of a French TV feature devoted to him in 2019, and he claimed there that his outlet sells 4,000 falafels a day. He claimed at that occasion, that means that this shop receives more than 10 times more visitors than the Jewish museum in the Palais Saint-Aignan. And his guests were, he said, people of the entire world. This is crazy. On one day, there are all the religions, all countries, no politics. And he tried to quantify his patrons according to a quite original classification. 25% Jews, 20% Parisians, 20% French, 20% tourists, 15% Muslims. For all these people, the ritual of eating falafel in the Rue des Rosiers replaces the possible visit to the Orthodox synagogue built by Hector Guimard right around the corner. You see the image there. The thought about Joe Goldenberg's restaurant, target of a violent attack by Palestinian terrorists in 1982 and subsequently closed, and possibly the Shoah memorial on the island. Everyone is happy. The Orthodox Jews may pray in peace, the tourists enjoy their falafel, and the Jewish experience is acquired at a little price. The neighborhood cultivates its Jewish specificity. Jewish fun things, it seems, are safer with the more conventional limits of consumerism. See the rediscovery of Jewish coffeehouse styles all over Europe that are revived by restaurant owner and that normally combine functionality with some degree of Jewish-themed messiness. In Budapest, the past decades saw the fashion of flodny, a layered cake made for Purim with walnuts, poppy seeds, grated apples, popularized through TV shows, food festivals, and cookbooks. This pre-war culinary item became an emblem of Hungarian Jewish identity. However, the most traditional pastry shop of the Fröhlich family, which had been a meeting place of young people since 1953, all through communist times, quietly closed its doors during the pandemic and is now succeeded by a nondescript bar. Jewish intangible heritage often includes the labor of retrieving memory from the overpowering time and the more inauthentic manifestations. These markers of personal and collective identities fade and re-emerge in the rhythm of the generations, in the surprising turns and changes of mind that make life, that makes life for every individual its own individual life. You remember the story of Azaguri, who as a mother ended up cooking the same heavy stew that she disliked as a youngster. At a time when heavily mediatized fashions risk obscuring family traditions, the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal is good news. And I'm happy to see that a group of people from European Jewish background has undertaken this creative endeavor of fixing daily and extraordinary moments in words, images, videos, and objects. The website will illustrate and celebrate the great variety of Jewish cultures in Europe, the distinction between secular and religious ways of life, but it will also discover the diversity between Central European traditions and those from the Mediterranean and the former Soviet Union that have come to enrich most Jewish communities on the continent. It is tempting to imagine the discussions that will unfold, the joyful déjà vus, and the spirit of mutual admiration that this portal may provoke among practitioners and non-practitioners of the traditions evoked. Ruth Gruber describes her well-known website, Jewish Heritage Europe, as, I quote, a go-to clearinghouse for both current news and a wealth of resources. And I hope that the Intangible Jewish Heritage Portal will have a similar role on a more profoundly inward-looking level, in ways that encourage the exchange between private lives within and without their community. I hope that this platform will also become a place of encounter, a Jewish space in the sense of Diana Pinto, that is, I quote, an open cultural and even political agora, where Jews intermingle with others qua Jews, and not just as citizens. When Ruth Gruber first described the emergence of Jewish heritage consciousness as a Jewish space in post-1989 Central and Eastern Europe, she keenly observed that some form of broader fascination with things Jewish transcended the neat division between producers and consumers of Jewish culture. Erika Lehrer even spoke of a conciliatory heritage, which in some way echoes the UNESCO beliefs that mutual heritage awareness may become a force ensuring exchange and understanding. How much time do I have? Should I close?
You can go the next 5 minutes for closure, I think. 5 minutes, yes. And we'll take the last 5 for questions.
That's fine, thank you.
Sure.
As Gruber has stated more recently, our universe is increasingly replaced with a metaverse, where virtual lives play as important a role as our physical realities. Digital procedures generate not only an avalanche of inauthenticity, but also new authenticities and real imaginary spaces where borders and identities blur. The new authenticities cannot be identified with the familiar concept of invented traditions that is so dear to us historians, since contemporary European Jews are not recreating the past. A Jewish space is filled up with Jews, Jewish culture, Jewish memory, and regardless of the presence or absence of local Jewish populations, a peculiar collaboration of the most diverse actors assures the persistence of traditions and the life with which it is credited. There are cases in which historical knowledge and contemporary life, Jewish and non-Jewish shareholders, locals and a larger European audience can interact. And the sharp division between the living and the dead heritage may be mitigated to some extent. It is probably too late to overcome the constant metaphorical binary between life and death, which has also been adopted into scholarly speech. But we should be critically aware of the polemical constructions that are at play here. Judaism does not entirely support the assumption that the present has always a larger authority and more right than the past and its authorities. We often re-embrace immaterial heritage after seeing it threatened by decline. Memory is a motivation that calls for a return to ancient tunes, tastes, and rituals after they have been forgotten or even rejected. Immaterial heritage is in no way exempt from the dialectic relation of loss and revival that characterizes our relation to material heritage. In her Budapest prayer service, Judith Frigyesi believed to sense, I quote, the mystery of Jewish prayer in which belief in life coexisted with the realization of its loss. Jewish intangible heritage bears manifold challenges. The inaccessible intimacy, the easy commodification, the fleeting ephemeral expression, the risk of reproducing easy stereotypes. The portal appears at a time in which Jewish culture must often fight for its social inclusion, but also a world of pluralism and encounters, of revivals and reconstructions, where heritage awareness is often a source of empathy, friendship, and personal familiarity. And even though we are meeting here in the cyberspace, I want to endorse Ruth Gruber's nostalgia of haunted physical places and real presences, and I hope that the digital voices of individual lives can become a case of new authenticity. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor. Your intervention made me think of the Amida and the moving towards and backwards, 3 steps forward and 3 steps backwards to the essence, to divinity. So it's completely overwhelming the way we can look at a certain thing that we thought it was so natural. So thank you for this intervention. I'm sure you have lots to say about this, and we would gladly have another session on the topic. But since we only have 5 minutes and we promised to take some questions, there is a particular one that interests all of us as organizations. Let me review it just for a bit. And just a second. I'm here. Okay. And the question is, but I'm not sure this refers necessarily to you. I think Victor would be the one most appropriate to answer the question. And the question is as follow. Somebody, Rahul Goswami, as a UNESCO expert on intangible cultural heritage in Asia mainly, there was a note of that terms like safeguarding, transmission, and continuity are used. Each of these and others comes out of essentially an expert process and not community reflections about itself and its history. The question for us, for all of us, is to what degree do we intend to employ UNESCO-derived or influenced terminology and methods in balance with those from within Jewry and the Jewish diaspora? And I think let's hear Victor first and see if we can move on.
Yes, with pleasure. Well, but obviously, Professor, don't hesitate. But just to reflect on what's the project Thrive approach to this thoughtful question, that it goes right into the heart of what we are trying to do here. I will start at saying that you are absolutely right, no? That much of the language around intangible cultural heritage emerged from institutional and expert-driven frameworks. At the same time, I will say that one of Thrive's core principles is precisely not to impose an external heritage vocabulary into Jewish life, but to start from within communities themselves, no? From lived practices, personal memories, and the ways people themselves understand what they are preserving, adapting, or letting evolve. So we certainly draw inspiration from UNESCO. That's why we are using the categories, and hopefully we can also support some of the entries in the website to be part of their portal. But I will say that we are using it as a useful analytical tool, but the methodology of the project is intentionally participatory. No? So in that sense, we see the UNESCO framework not as a template, but as a one reference point among others. So the balance we are aiming, I will say it's very much one where professional heritage tool support community voices rather than replace them. And thanks for the question, because it's a very
yes.
a very good one.
Yes,
and I don't know, Professor, if you will.
Yeah, we've been talking about this within
Exactly.
the team. But Professor, we would like to hear your view on this. What do you think is the way of this heritage, and what should be our approach to integrating this or following UNESCO guidelines?
I think these are inspiring guidelines, but they cannot be entirely integrated because Jewish space and Jewish time as an experience is quite different. UNESCO intangible heritage has been developed with respect to community, mainly rural communities, who have a compact population in some part of the world, who are very clearly delimited in terms of geography, and to communicate with the outside world, show their traditions and their culture to others. For the Jewish diaspora, it looks differently. So the main communication is not between one compact community and the outside world, but there are many different communities with their traditions, with their experiences, who first of all want to know each other and want to dialogue, come into a dialogue with each other. So there is a task, and there is also a vocation of immaterial heritage that is in a way different, and there is a different time structure as well. It is not the rural community that loses its traditions by and by in the process of modernization. It is a modern, and already from the 19th century, urbanized community that we are thinking about, that loses its traditions very largely through the impact of political violence, and that recovers them later on through a very complex social process. If we think about the post-Soviet space, for example, there is not a continuity of transmission. There is not a clear opposition between the more lively environments of the past and the need to continue them. There is much more of an effort to be made to listen even to ancestors and to the traditions that come from a gap over generations. So that some of the models that are developed by UNESCO, especially the loosening grip of natural spaces, of living in nature and recovering nature, are not exactly what we're speaking about when we think about the Jewish memory of family spaces and natural spaces and also urban environments. So much has to be thought in different ways, and even sometimes the other way around.
Thank you, Professor. As I said, it's in more and more complex context to consider when we speak about intangible Jewish heritage, especially Jewish heritage in this perspective. Thank you again for joining us and clarifying or introducing some of us in this topic. We do have other questions. Unfortunately, we're out of time. I would just like to announce our viewers and participants that our page with comments and questions is still open. So if you would like us to reply to your questions, just leave an email address and we'll get back to you. We saw all your comments and we saw the questions. Unfortunately, we have to close this session for today, but we promise to reconsider another one, maybe in another context with more professionals and more perspectives, because this is a beautiful project that is all about us, Jewish or non-Jewish. Thank you all. Thank you all for being here with us, and we're looking forward to your submissions. Please browse the website and let's make a beautiful exhibition of our memories and our families and the stories behind. Thank you all so much. Looking forward to your submissions.